This is Dr. Bryson, your nerdy criminal justice professor, with a brief video on Marbury v. Madison. Behind the camera is John Marshall Park here in the great city of Washington, D.C. Behind me you can see the appeals court for the District of Columbia. So I wanted to talk about Marbury v. Madison in this particular video. Why? Because that case really made John Marshall. Now, for those of us in West Virginia, we have John Marshall High School up near the old penitentiary. We've got Marshall University, named for John Marshall. We've got streets. All sorts of things are named for John Marshall in the state of West Virginia. He was the longest serving Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. So what is Marbury v. Madison? Well, before he was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall was Secretary of State, and one of his duties was to deliver commissions for various government appointments. There was a new system of federal magistrates that had been passed by Jefferson, and they were upset, the Jeffersonians were upset that Madison had won the election. They believed he was going to take the country in the wrong direction. So they pushed through this magistrate legislation pretty quickly. So all of these magistrate commissions were made. Only a couple of them, Marbury in particular, sat on John Marshall's desk on his last day and did not get delivered. Well, because they did not get delivered, Marbury and the others could not officially take office. So Marbury sued the Madison administration. And it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court some years later, where John Marshall, as Chief Justice, writes the decision of the court. Now I want to point out, because he created this crisis, John Marshall should have recused himself. This was one of the most dishonest things done by a Supreme Court justice, in my opinion, that he did not recuse himself. So, the case of Marbury v. Madison. First, John Marshall said Madison had to deliver the commissions. The commissions were made, they were valid, and Madison was wrong in not delivering the commissions. But second, John Marshall said, unfortunately, we're the Supreme Court, and because of separation of powers, we cannot order the president to do anything. That is, we cannot provide a writ of mandamus. But third, also very important to this case, it established judicial review by the Supreme Court. Now, what is judicial review? That means that all laws are subject to review by the U.S. Supreme Court for their consistency with the U.S. Constitution. Now, I want you to hear this. In other words, the Supreme Court can say that what the legislative branch does is wrong and strike it down. But they self-proclaimed that what the executive branch does, they cannot strike down. They cannot order the president to do anything. So it's kind of important to understand that this whole idea of separation of powers and how that was delineated in this particular case. And one other thing that is important to point out, John Marshall gave the U.S. Supreme Court the authority to do what in that court decision he said the Supreme Court can't do. So he was able to create a system by saying you can't do this. So in essence, he gave the Supreme Court permission to do something by saying we can't do this. Very important to understand Marbury v. Madison and its import for the rule of law, as we call it in the U.S. We'll see you next video.